So let's go and get started. Let's talk a little bit about you. This is all about you. We had a chance to catch up after many years of not talking on a regular basis, but we certainly caught up with some good information here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where were you born?
Well, I was born in Harlem Hospital up there in New York City.
Okay.
And lived there all my life until I changed. I became about 54 years old. During that time, I went to, I lived in New Jersey for a while. Then when I went back, during the war years, when I went back to New York City, it was just me and my father. My mother had passed when I was like 3 years old. So I ended up in PS 139 in Harlem there. And I kept complaining to my father that they had put me into I forgot what it was, like a 714 class, which is equivalent to about third grade, I think. And I kept complaining to my father that, I'm not learning anything. This is old stuff. So finally he took off one day, which he didn't like. I went down and talked to that principal. I went from the 713 class to the 8-1 class. And then like that,
nice.
Yeah. Not only that, but I also was put into a class to take the tech for Brooklyn Tech. Take the test.
Nice.
So I passed that and ended up going to Brooklyn Tech. Took the aeronautical engineering course, which is a 4-year course. For those that are not familiar with Brooklyn Tech, it's a high school in New York that has 7 engineering courses. And I took the aeronautical engineering course. So for 4 years, I was drafting, studying hydraulics and doing machine shop stuff, and you name it, technical wise, and we did it. We made patterns, had pattern making classes, industrial processing classes, and so finally at the end I graduated and went on to Pratt Institute. When I got to Pratt Institute, the first year there was a song because I already learned all that stuff in Brooklyn Tech. So,
yeah, that was one of the things we talked about early on was that our education at Stuyvesant and Brooklyn Tech really was pushing the limits, right? In terms of education, we had to learn to do things that many times we didn't even have. Many people didn't have exposure to early on in their careers in high school. By the time we got to college, a lot of the things had already been covered, and maybe in different parts of our careers, we'd already done some of these things, but we did it in high school.
Yeah.
So can you talk about what classes inspired you the most when you were at Brooklyn Tech, and what teachers inspired you?
Well, my drafting teacher, he would design an airfoil and give it to at that time it was NACA. And you had to produce all these drawings. And guess who did all the drawings? The class.
Smart man.
Right, really. The hydraulic shops, the aeronautical engineer, aerodynamics classes and everything were really great. And it gave me a good base for going into the aviation industry. And I found out that if you take this aviation cadet test, you get exempt from the draft, which is great because I can now go to school, as well as at that time I started working as an apprentice welder in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So I passed the test, which was no big deal. And I figure the Air Force said, don't call us, we'll call you. And that's exactly what happened. But then I got a letter from the Air National Guard telling me I can get a class right away. And I wasn't really interested in getting a class right away. I was interested in going to school and working at the Navy Yard. I got a second letter saying we can get your class right away. The third letter came and said, if you don't get down here and talk to us, we're going to send the APs after you. So I got down to Floyd Bennett Field and talked to him and convinced him that I would go into the Air Force and get my training after I finished the semester in May. And that's what I did.
Very well.
Yeah.
Very well. So tell us about the flight training. How is it? What was the process that you went through to get selected to fly the aircraft that you came to fly? And tell us a little bit about that aircraft. I'm not going to spill the beans here for you because it's a pretty exciting story.
Well, I got to San Antonio, Texas in the middle of the night because Braniff was late. Got down there at 3 o'clock in the morning instead of 8 o'clock at night. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, they got us up. And we had these flashlights that they use for signaling in the aircraft with that red tip on it. So all you could see in the middle of the night was these red tip flashlights going back and forth. And a whole lot of yelling and screaming. You know, I don't know if they're yelling at me or they're yelling at who they were yelling at. But I was so sleepy, I could care less. We went to Chow, and it became a very interesting day. But we spent 6 weeks there learning to become an officer, how to salute, how to march, and all that kind of. Then I went to Marianna, Florida, start my basic training in T-34s, which is a Bonanza. And then after about 30 hours there, we went into the T-28s, which was a North American airplane.
Yeah,
really.
The real man's airplane.
Really, North American built great airplanes. Well, they did build great airplanes. We left Marianna, Florida in January, and we went to good old Greenville, Mississippi, and ended up in the T-33, which is the first jet trainer. And spent, from January until July in Greenville, Mississippi. Once we graduated from there, we got our wings and our commission, and ended up going out to here, which Williams Air Force Base out here, up in Phoenix, where we got checked out in the F-86s.
What year was that?
That was 1958. July.
So what were some of the things that were going on in 1958 that were happening around you? Like, can you describe what kind of world it was that you were working around in?
Yeah, well, there was still, down south there was still segregation. They just couldn't get used to this stuff. But the people that dealt with the military, they knew better. So as a result, they did subtle. And I happened to punch one of them somewhere along the way. Ended up flying me, when I graduated, ended up flying me up to Memphis, where I can, then I got on a train, actually, and took a train to Virginia and got married. So I didn't get a chance to spend 1 month of my lieutenant pay. So I got married July the 6th, 1958. And we ended up being married for 59 years, 11 months, and 15 days when she passed away in July of 2018.
I'm sorry to hear that. And that I know that I got to meet her many a time at the various fly-ins and the various events that we had. Tell us how she supported you, and she seemed to be the love of your life. So tell us a little bit about how she lived her life.
Well, I couldn't get any more supportive. I tried. No matter what I wanted to do, she was right behind me, regardless. And so I ended up fly with the National Guard with F-86Hs over White Plains Airport. And I came back from the military, and I was working back at the Brooklyn Navy Yard as an apprentice welder. I think it's in my third year.
And approximately what year was that again?
1958.
1958. Okay, very good. Very good. All right, for those of you just joining us, my name is Victor, and I'm here with Captain Les Morris. Captain Les Morris is former president and founder of NAI, and then he's also one of the founding members of BPA. So, Captain Morris, can you tell us about the origins of NAI? Because when I joined NAI, it was about 1989, 1990, but it had already been well established. Can you tell us a little about that organization, how it started?
Well, it was started with a guy named Ed Gibbs. Ed Gibbs, Charlie Smallwood, John Dickerson, Lee Archer. They were all civilian flight instructors down in Tuskegee for the Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen had to go through basically a civilian training course, flying Piper Cubs. And then after they passed that, they literally went across the street to the Air Force Base and started flying their T-6s over there. So Chief Anderson, or Charles Alfred Anderson, who called him Chief, was the chief pilot for the civilian side of the outfit. And he's the one that gave Eleanor Roosevelt a ride in the Piper Cub around Moulton Field. And of course, the chiefs tell you the Secret Service had a fit. They didn't want her to get in that airplane at all. And when she got back to Washington, she got on Roosevelt's butt to push on through and get the program completed and expanded. So that was the genesis of basically the Tuskegee Airmen.
Okay, so let's talk about NAI. And I want to, for those of you who don't know what NAI is, this is how old the organization was. It was started off as Negro Airmen International. So let's talk about, Mr. Gibbs, Lee Archer, all those gentlemen who I got a chance to meet at various points. So let's talk about the genesis of NAI, Negro Airmen International. What was the impetus for that? What was the driver for forming that organization? What was its goals?
Yeah. Well, its goals, of course, were to get blacks into aviation because after all those guys came back from the military with all kinds of experience, none of them got hired at all, except for Augie Martin. And he got hired as a pilot with Seaboard World, which was a cargo airline. So Ed Gibbs got NAI started, and I was the treasurer, and we got, believe it or not, Goldwater got us our tax-exempt certificate.
Barry Goldwater?
Barry Goldwater, yeah. And,
just a minor note in history who that person was. So Senator Barry Goldwater.
maybe folks are too young to know who Barry Goldwater was, but he was a senator in Arizona here, as a matter of fact. And a real, I guess radical. I mean, he had ideas that nobody else really liked. But he was a pusher, and at that time, of course, had a lot of power in the Senate. He got pretty much what he wanted, But when he ran for president, if I'm not mistaken, he was going to use the atomic bomb on Russia or something like that. It got me really wild.
Wow. So NAI, when it first started, actually when I joined the organization, we had quite a representation of folks here from the main line. We had Coach Draper. We had, of course, Chief Anderson. We had Dr. Williams. So Dr. Williams, if I remember correctly, flew the B-25, and he had bombardier wings, navigator's wings, and pilot's wings. How how did that come to be a national organization? How did the people who were here in the main line connect up with the folks from around the country? Like, how did that occur?
Ed Gibbs was a real politician, and we would have meetings in various cities, at least 3 times a year. And we would go to Atlanta, have a city, and have a meeting. And of course, Ed Gibbs would have all the television cameras there and everything, and he would just move around, and the organization just started exploding.
Now, back in so 1970s thereabouts, is that a good reference point when NAI started, about 1970?
I started in 1967.
67, okay. So I came to know it through family members 1970. At the time, there were probably 55,000 pilots across the country, commercial, military, and civilian aviation. What was the percentage representation of African-American pilots or black pilots in the country at the time?
It was less than 1%. Matter of fact, I started with Easter in 1965, and by 1970, I think Ebony put out a issue, and I think we had about 25 in there in 1970. That is
okay.
In passenger carrying airlines.
So 25 and all right. So flash forward to today, we're still about 0.4, 0.5% of the total pilot population, somewhere around there. What has been your experience just with working at flight safety and working in the connections to the military? What has been your experience?
I will see more than I used to see, for sure. I'm sure, we're moving along. We maybe got 1% in here by now, but because as I travel with the United, occasionally you'll see a Afro-American pilot, co-pilot, or captain, and you'll see him walking through the terminals and stuff. So we'll be getting to get in there.
So let's talk about the Summer Flight Academy, because I know that's something very near and dear to your heart.
Yeah.
So when I first met you, we were working with Organization of Black Airline It was Organization of Black Airline Pilots, now Organization of Black Airline Professionals. We had Tuskegee Airmen International, and we had NAI. You started the Summer Flight Academy, and what would happen there is you would take us as flight instructors and get people to volunteer their time. Tell us about that program, how it worked, and how many students have gone through.
Well, once I got out of the military, I did get my flight instructor ready. What I found was, as a matter of fact, one incident I can still remember, some instructor asked me to sign off the student cross country out of New York there, going up towards upstate. So the mountains, I asked the kid, what altitude you going to fly at? He told me at 2,500 feet. And I said, you got mountains out there, 4,000, 5,000 feet. He says, well, as long as I have the correct altimeter setting, I won't have any problem. Well, he didn't get signed off by me. And then I began to realize that a lot of these kids are not getting proper training.
Yeah.
They get into an airplane, and ground school was, understanding what was going on was very minimal. So that's the reason I decided to start this summer camp, is to make sure that people that want to get into the aviation industry as pilots, at least got some basic training and understanding of what they're doing, instead of just go up there and flying and, well, when you make a turn, you pull the nose up some and make a turn, not knowing why or anything else. So that's the reason I started the Summer Flight Academy.
And how many students have come through the Summer Flight Academy? Do you have any statistics on that?
Oh, no. I think the last time I looked at it was around 600-700.
Okay. And we have a good representation of people out in commercial military aviation, today. What does it feel like to see some of your former students come back and see the success or the distance that they've traveled in their careers?
Yeah, well, we have quite a few. Of course, keeping in contact with most of them is pretty hard, but there are a few like Dawn Cook. She's with Delta now, about to check out as captain. Marvin Smith down in Texas was checked out as captain.
Mike Pinkney at UPS.
I'm sorry, say again?
Was it Mike Pinkney, one of the students, Summer Flight Academy students, Bill Pinkney's son?
Right, Bill Pinkney's son, yeah. Right. He was at UPS. I'm sure he's a captain by now.
Oh, he is, yes.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's, then I have these kids that come up and tell me how they saw my picture in Ebony magazine when they were in kindergarten. And I'll slap them to sleep. So, my teacher showed me your picture when I was in kindergarten. Go away, kid.
Well, I have to tell you, you've been one of my inspirations because even, I don't know if you remember this, but we had a meeting in Tuskegee. And at one of the meetings, we had Coach with us, and we had Al Thomas. For those of you, these names are not familiar to most of you, but Bill Pinkney was a former president of NAI from the Philadelphia area. Al Thomas was a treasurer for NAI chapter, the Roscoe Coach Draper in Philadelphia, and the BPA chapter in Philadelphia. But these gentlemen were in their 70s. I'm following along with them in my 30s, and I couldn't keep up with you guys. And now I probably can even keep up with you.
You can keep up with me now. I'm slowing down. Believe me.
You're slowing down? All right. I somehow I don't believe you, but I'll go with it. All right. So tell me about your time with flights. Actually, let's go back to Eastern Airlines because we didn't really explore that all too much. What was it like going into the operation there? And tell us a little about your career once you started. And you can give us some dates that would be helpful.
Well, I started Eastern in November of '65, and I flew the Constellation as a flight engineer for about 2 years, and then I went to...
And Les, not to interrupt you, because I'm going to interrupt you, because I don't think people understand. You talked earlier about your time with Brooklyn Tech. You talked about your time at New York Polytech. You talked about this injection molding and understanding materials and the Air Force and all these other pieces. When you arrived at Eastern to fly the Connie, to be a flight engineer, you already had a considerable amount of experience. One of the requirements for being a flight engineer was to have an A&P, correct? An airframe and power plants certificate.
No, if you did the Eastern Airlines course, then you didn't have to have the A&P.
Ah, okay. So tell us how advanced that course was then.
Well, it was November, December, January, 3 months. And during that 3-month period, and at that time you were going to be an engineer. You're going to have to be able to take plugs out of the engine and all that kind of stuff, And like I said, the background in Brooklyn Tech for 4 years taught me just about all that stuff I didn't remember. Of course, I didn't know it. And even have experience, removing plugs and gapping them and all that kind of business. But when I went to get my the check airman to give him my final rating as a flight engineer, he asked me a question about the pressurization system. And I didn't understand the question, so I just drew it out for him. And after I drew the whole thing out for him, I asked him, what was your question? And he told me, just forget about it. Let's move on.
I had a similar experience when I first started with the carrier that I'm with. And they used to call this one of the flight instructors used to call him Santa Claus. And he was known for asking you a really hard question, very similar to what you just described. And he said to me, so tell me about this A7 Papa November -7 APU. And I went through basically the same thing. And he goes, well, and I won't use the expletive, somebody's been in the books. Let's talk about flying. Let's talk about my J3 Cub. And the rest of the check ride was kind of easy. So yeah, there's some benefits to knowing your craft. So your progress from flight engineer to first officer, approximately how much time did that take?
But in my 2-year period, I had so much seniority that I became a senior flight officer. Well, let me tell you, the first 2 years, you're on probation. And so they put you where they wanted you. And after the second year, you then can exercise your seniority. And I went from a flight engineer to the first officer on the most senior airplane.
Okay.
Because I had so many people behind me that was being hired at that time. So I went.
It was a big growth period. It was a big growth period in the airlines, correct?
Yeah. So I went on the DC-8 and I flew the DC-8 from 1978 to about 1968 to about 1971. And then Eastern got rid of the DC-8s and ended up with 7. And I flew there. And then I went to the Lockheed 1011 and I flew that as a first officer.
So for those of us who don't know what the DC-8 is, it looked like a Boeing 707, a 4-engine airplane,
right?
Like a long pencil-looking 4-engine airplane.
Yeah,
solid, built like a rock.
Yeah, it was Douglas answer to the Boeing airplane.
Exactly. Travel. Where were some of the places that you traveled to?
You mean as flying is concerned? Or?
Yeah.
Of course, at that time we flew up and down the East Coast. Basically, excuse me. Atlanta, Miami, Texas, Houston. We were the first to land at the new Dallas airport, out there in the middle of nowhere. And basically that was it until deregulation. Then we started expanding over to the West Coast and stuff. And then we also flew the Caribbean and then eventually into South America. So it was, it depended on the deregulation. And deregulation hit everybody to where they wanted to go. So that's when we started expanding.
So let's go back to where we are today. So we've made some progress in terms of aviation. We have the Summer Flight Academy. And also, for those of you who don't know, just going to reintroduce ourselves here. My name is Victor. I'm here with Captain Les Morris, former captain at Eastern Airlines. And we're just going through some of his history here. Your Summer Flight Academy. Tell us, if people are interested in learning more about it and possibly contributing to it, where would they go?
They go to our website, which is bpapilots.org.
Okay.
And this
so the Summer Flight Academy. So bpapilots.org. Bravo Papa Alpha, PILOTS.org. And they can look up the Summer Flight Academy. Right. And approximately, we couldn't do it this year because of the COVID-19. But last year, how many people did we have attend? How many students do we have?
We take a maximum of 16 now.
Okay.
It's mainly because we can get the additional airplanes. Light airplanes or training airplanes in general aviation are short for the mileage.
Okay.
And so as a result, we end up 16. We can always get 4 or 5 airplanes. We always like to have one spare there just in case. Because when you start putting 40 to 60 hours on the airplane in 2 weeks, they tend to break down. So we always got to have a spare sitting around.
Absolutely. All right. So let's flash forward to today. We have this COVID-19 thing going.
Yeah. sorry, you cut out.
Okay, are you well at home? Everything's going well in Tucson, Green Valley area?
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And so, based on your experience and the things you've gone through in the past, what's your perception of where we are?
Well, we were doing good. We were expanding and doing well. BPA is expanding quite a bit now, or was anyway. But when and we were, of course, heading for a flight on Memorial Day weekend, but you could see right away when the virus hit, registration stopped immediately, and matter of fact, we canceled the thing and just sent the refunds out about a week ago.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So,
but in terms of day-to-day stuff, as far as how it's affected how you run your life day-to-day, has it been much of an impact on you?
Oh no, it has no impact. Very little impact on me, except possibly of catching them like old am I? So I'm 83 years old right now, and so they tell me I'm in the vulnerable group. So I just go out and hit the post office, go to the grocery store once in a while. Other than that, break up the board and I'll go driving someplace. I'm in good, fairly good shape as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
It's still.
One of the questions that's popped up with regards to the Summer Flight Academy is the average age of the students. What's the age range that we typically deal with?
We typically do a 16 to 19. But the magic thing is 16. At 16, they can solo. And we have about 40 to 50% of the students solo.
And all of them have to pass the pilot written when they're done with the summer anyway, right? So they all get the written done.
Correct.
Very good. When was the last time that you flew?
Oh, well, I just did a BFR, Biennial Flight Review, about a month ago.
Excellent. So you still keep your flight instructor certificate going full blast?
Yeah. So.
And you know what? I've always said I want to be like you, and I want to be like you.
Okay.
We both have quite some flight experiences, so it's all a good thing. So what's new? What's next in the future? What's going to happen next week, next month?
Well, I retired from Flight Safety International, and right now I'm just once we get rid of this virus and I can get on the airplane again, I'll be doing my normal trips here and there. Like last year I went to Norway, and then came up to New Jersey there for Roscoe Draper's 100th birthday. And
yeah.
After that, to the meeting. And so I'm usually on an airplane at least 15 to 20 times during the year, And I'm fully retired, living comfortably. And so things are going well, as far as I'm concerned.
Excellent. Well, I'm hoping that I get to see you on the flight deck sometime in the very near future. That would be a real honor, especially given our history together. We were catching up and talking about the Stuyvesant connection, Brooklyn Tech connection, the Harlem connection with my dad doing the construction business up there. It's a very small community, very small world, especially when it comes to aviation. One of the things I hope that everybody comes away with that's watching is that the thing I love about aviation is that it's almost timeless. Les and I have known each other, I've been flying for 30 years. I've been with the airline for 20. So I've been flying for 30 years. And I think I met you pretty early on. And you were a huge inspiration to me. And I didn't even know you went to school in Brooklyn. What's wrong with that picture? We didn't discover that till yesterday. So one of the beauties of all this is even to this day, There's always lessons to be learned. What I love about aviation is that it's like an apprenticeship, and it's a constant learning apprenticeship. We had our challenges today with getting on Instagram today, but we got checked out on it, right? We can check that box off for next time.
Box off, yeah.
Are there any parting words that you could leave that everybody with here that's in the audience that will help guide them for the next foreseeable future?
Well, as I tell all young folks, no matter what job you're doing, do it as well as you can, and it'll definitely be recognized sooner or later. And try to make yourself a professional at whatever you're doing, and that will carry you through your life. I would at least say I was a check airman with Eastern Airlines, and which meant that basically I would get a new captain or a new first officer, and I have to fly with them for X amount of hours. And every once in a while, I would get a comment. For example, I was checking a guy into Reno, Nevada, which has a very stiff crosswind. And I'm sitting in the right seat, new captain sitting in the left seat. And he says to me, why don't you just fly this on into Reno? Because he knew the winds were 45 knot crosswinds. So I took him into Reno, showed him how to do it. And there are times that every once in a while we get a comment from a captain or a first officer, like, I'm surprised you fly that well, or I'm surprised you do this, I'm surprised you do that. But yeah, I tried to make it, I tried to make sure I knew what I was doing and why I was doing it, and that's the important, and do it best I could. So.
And that's the legacy you left me. How did you acquire? Who was your inspiration when you were coming along? Which pilot was your inspiration?
I didn't really have one until I met Ed, which was about, let's say I lived in Eastern by 2 years by then. So my inspiration was really my wife's uncle, who was my post advisor, and he was a high tech for built his own TV, projection TV, and all that kind of stuff. I always tell friends how we were down in his basement, learned how to do Morse code, how to build walkie-talkies, understand the oscilloscopes and all that kind of business. And he was a good inspiration, as well as my scoutmaster. Used to be also, just go do it.
I'm laughing. You know why I'm laughing? Because, again, we had very similar paths. I actually had 47 phones in my bedroom at one point as a kid. Because back then, Bell Telephone, you rented the phone from Bell Telephone. So we lived in New York City. We had an apartment. We were in an apartment building. And when people would move out, they would leave the phones in the hallway. And if the Bell Telephone guy didn't come pick them up, or they were going to throw them in the trash, I just picked them up. So I hooked these all into my room. So when the phone rang in the house, I think you could raise the dead what was going on. But I learned how to make phone switches.
I also understand you built a simulator. I never did get
yes, I did.
Yeah.
That was the time I went down to Tucson to flight safety in Tucson. Mm-hmm. And let's reintroduce you, Captain Morris. This is Victor Castro. I'm speaking with Captain Les Morris, former captain at Eastern Airlines, pioneering, former founding member of NAI, actually of BPA, and past president of Negro Airmen International. So I was in Tucson. Actually, this was actually a very interesting story. So you said to me, if you can get down here on the off times that the sims are down, we'll get you through your Lear type, because I was already flying the Learjet, but they didn't get me a type ratings. I was basically the right seat guy. And at the time you could do it without getting a type rating in it as a first officer. So you very generously said, if you can get down here, get your butt down here, and we'll throw you in the sim. And the first thing you said to me when this thing took off down the taxiway in the sim was, I was like, man, this is fast. He goes, well, this is no Piper Cub. Get your head in the game. And then you proceeded to put me through my paces, and it made me a much better pilot. And I took that inspiration also to build a simulator in the basement of my house. It was based on the Fokker 100, which I think
Really?
I thought it was, yeah.
That still amazes me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's all because it's your fault. So, anyway, we're going to wrap it up for this evening. It's certainly been a pleasure talking with you in front of the group here. I would like to, we're going to do a follow-on series with regards to Tuskegee Airmen. And I know that one of your inspirations that we didn't talk about was Chappie James. We talked with General Harold E. Pierce. We had some other folks that have passed through our doors at NAI and BPA that have been incredible people, including Coach Draper. Coach Draper was a secondary flight instructor right behind Chief Anderson during the civilian pilot training program at Tuskegee. We have a gentleman, professor here in Westchester, another mainline connection, Dr. Robert Kodosky, who wrote a book about the Tuskegee Airmen and Philadelphia, the connections to Philadelphia. So I look forward to sitting with you as we have some of these other folks on and talk about the connections that we have across this country and the globe.
All right. Very good.
All right. Much love to you. Much respect. I miss flying with you. We'll do it again very soon.
Okay. Take care. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Les. Have a good evening.
Take care.
All right, folks. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to sitting down and talking with you, telling you some more stories. There's